This is the FRC Roundtable, coming to you all the way from Minnesota. Your host team 2052 Nightcrawler presents this weekly FRC gathering where FIRST Robotics competition teams take cooperation off the field. Share your knowledge, give and get advice, solve a challenge, or celebrate what makes your team special. 3, 2, 1, go!
Okay, the recording has been started. Welcome, everybody. Looks like we have a small crowd tonight. I'm guessing everybody's exhausted and probably also on spring break. I know our school's on spring break. So,
Daylight saving time.
Oh, daylight savings time. Yeah, maybe people just got the time wrong. Actually, they should have been on here an hour ago.
Also, I'm not sure if an email was sent out today because I was checking my email.
I sent an email out
It was on
Friday.
Okay.
All right. Well, anyway, nobody signed up to do a topic for tonight, so I dug through the mailing list topics, and one of the the suggested topics was build cadence. How do you pace yourself through the build season? We've talked a little bit before about what the schedule are that teams have and how they meet. I'm really curious to know if anyone feels like they're constantly trying to improve and they're considering changing their schedule for the season, or if they have any recommendations for anyone else. That's our topic for tonight. We can talk about anything anybody else wants to talk about too if we run out of things to talk about with that, but that's the topic of the night. So does anybody want to start and share kind of how their team runs through build season and what they like about it and what they think could be improved?
I could share a little bit about 2472. We meet 2 evenings a week. The kids meet from like 3 to 8. Sometimes it's 8:30 by the time leadership is done, and then Saturdays from 9 to 3. And then some of the specialty groups like drive team or programming might meet on a Monday or a Wednesday in between there so they can get some uninterrupted time with the robot, because that seems to be some of the strife, if you will. Everyone wants time with it to make the tweaks, to get the practice, and there's just never enough time. It's a finite resource.
Stacy, is that your meeting schedule through the entire build season?
Yes.
3 to 8. You said 3 days a week and Saturdays?
I have 2 days a week and Saturdays.
Oh,
and then there's usually some of the specialty teams that are meeting either on they meet Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the other team, some of the subgroups will meet like on a Monday or a Wednesday in addition to that.
I guess I will share that Nightcrawler changes their meeting schedule starting with kickoff, and we start meeting Monday and Friday 6 until 9, and Wednesday 6 until 8, and then the leadership team has a leadership meeting from 8 until 9 on Wednesdays, and then we meet from 9 until 4 on Saturdays. So I guess that adds up to 8 hours during the week, and then about 6 to 7 hours on Saturdays. That's how we start the build season, and then usually by about week 4 we start having optional meetings, and so students who have a task and want to work on something, largely it's usually the build students in the beginning, and then it's the programming students the last week. Hopefully the last week the programming students have the robot, and that will often go every day of the week for anywhere from 3 hours or from after school until our regular meeting time ends at 8 or 9, which it can really get to be a long slog those last 2 or 3 weeks. But we start out at, I don't want to say a leisurely pace, but it definitely isn't as much as some other teams are probably meeting.
Hey, Stacy, where are you from?
2472, the Centurions out of Circle Pines, Centennial High School.
Okay, thanks.
I'll say that we're a small team. We only have 7 kids. So as soon as the game is released, we meet every night. So right after school, sometimes like that 3 to 4 time is maybe some homework time, some downtime. But then mentors show up by 4. Kids are there from 4 till 7, 5 days a week. And then we put in time when we need to on Saturdays and Sundays. The goal is always to get the robot built within the first 5 weeks, if possible, so that it gives programmers time to take over. But realistically, our builders are our programmers too, so they know what they're doing for that. And I guess now that we're done with our first event, we've already got the plans for what we want to move forward with, and it's still 5 days a week from here on out until Granite City.
Natasha, what team are you on?
3277 Prodigy.
Oh,
So, so for Ashby, I think we've been playing around with, switching back and forth. I think the biggest change we made is we this season have practices Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays 3:15 to 5:30, and then Saturdays 9 to 3. The biggest issue with mine, kids of 7 or 8, depending on the day, and then I got like 3 or 4 who really know what they need to do and what's going on. The other 3 or 4, they need to be guided along with, and so sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes, depending on the day, that's, with one adult supervision, that's usually where the biggest problem is. Like, because I'm busy with this other person, and, then you have somebody here goofing off over here. That's kind of where our the downfall of our schedule is. But overall, we don't do practices on Wednesday because, people have, youth groups and those kind of things, and they like to respect that. So not to, to step on those families, because you got to respect those parents, their, values, if you want them to work with you on the things that are important for your team. So, but I think we probably might stick to that schedule or modify slightly. If anything, drive one day, and or because we can't stay till in and later, because I struggle getting them to stay past 5:30, to do anything. So, and then I too want to come home too, because I'm gone pretty much most of the time. So that's kind of the toss up on our scheduling and practice time on Aerobots.
Yeah, I can share what Team 2847, the megahertz, does. So we meet Mondays and Thursdays from 6:30 to 8:30, and then Saturdays from 9 to 2, and then we have open shop times. Tuesday from 3:30 to 8, Friday also from 3:30 to 8, and then Saturdays from 2 to 8, and then basically however much you get done in that time is what we get done.
For 3926, we meet Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 3 to 6, and then Saturday from 12 to 6. And then later on in the season, if needed, we'll start adding optional Tuesday lab hours. Usually those are like for specific groups, like, oh, code team needs the robot this day. And then if things get, really desperate, which they usually do by week 6 or, right before comp, then we might extend it to like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. at night.
So for 2846, the Fire Bears, last year we met 7 days a week when you include drive practice and optional meetings, which was not sustainable. This year we went down to 4 meetings a week. So we have full team meetings Tuesdays from 6:30 to 9:30, and then Saturdays from 9 to 4. with leadership staying till 5. And then we call them task meetings on Thursdays and Fridays, 6:30 to 9:30, where, at the beginning of the build season, that was more build, then it morphed to more programming as the season developed. And it's been much better, much more sustainable. We've only had to add a few meetings outside of that schedule, and most of those were following week 0 leading into Duluth. So
Did we miss anybody? I think we may have gone around the horn.
Oh, I could share too.
Okay,
From-
Silas.
From 4728, last year we had 5 seniors, so everyone could just, drive themselves. And last year we met kind of ridiculous hours. I think we met 4 days a week from like 3:30 to 9, and then Saturdays from like 8 to I don't know, like 8, 9 something. This year we've scaled it back a lot because we only have 3 students, and we're meeting like 4 days a week, 3 to 6. Then on Saturdays from 8 to 6. So kind of ridiculous, but
Silas, what team are you with?
4728 from Ricori.
Okay. Anyone else want to share their schedule? So one of the things I'm curious about, and Tyler, I know that you guys did this year, and I don't know if you do it every year, but I'm curious how many teams built sort of a prototype bot and then switch over to sort of a final bot. And I don't know how involved that is for a lot of teams. Sometimes it's just a mechanism made out of plywood. We switch over to polycarb or aluminum or something like that. And how many times that's a full-blown second robot from the chassis up, or maybe on a second chassis. I'm really curious to know what teams are building a second bot and how that went for them this year.
So we went that route, and there was a lot of benefits for doing that because our first, Natasha, were you a Brainerd?
No, we didn't. We just
Oh.
went to Nevis the next week, but not at Brainerd.
Okay, because we went to Brainerd with our first robot, and a lot of things weren't line up. And if you have the drill bearing holes with hands and multiple of them that need to line up, it just didn't work out. And so one of the things that I've been pushing with one of my kids, and thanks God, it's CAD. And so our second robot was able to be built from CAD. That really helped a lot. And so at the end of this, coming to this point in the season, we kind of looked at it as like, maybe we should just invest our time into, getting a nice CAD drawing for our robot, and and just build a good robot, and then that time is saved and resources also too can maybe pay off at the other end of being able to have more drive time, because that's the biggest struggle we had even in Grand Forks, was we didn't have any driving time. By the time we got there, the gyro was not working properly, and so he's thinking he's driving on fuel-oriented drive when the robot is going in, and so he kept slant. Those stages are not meant for robots. I'm sorry, those things are brutal. We got so many mangled, bent parts from a robot that is just horrendous, and so it's just what it is. I think it was worth a try. We learned a lot of things from building our first robot before building the second robot. However, the time factor really, really pushed us, because I figured we could have built one robot, and knowing exactly what we're doing to build one robot, we could have done it faster and probably have some driving time at home.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting dynamic. So compared to last year, where 3926 built 2 robots and we kind of went with the build fast and break things, because we have a less experienced build sub team this year, we decided to go with the more slow. We're going to CAD everything, to near perfection before we start building. And that, I think, helped out in a lot of ways and didn't help out in a lot of ways, because when we made the robot, it kind of all came together. We weren't worrying about, things like our arm didn't have too much backlash because of the way we designed it and the way it was mounted. The handoff, centered the notes and worked nearly like I think on the second or third try. But then also it really limited us in time that we had to build things because we were building, really close up until the deadline, and so we didn't get time to build a spare shooter, for example, and that really hurt us at the regional because we have an arm. We're going under the stage. The arm got raised for whatever reason into the bottom of the stage. PID loop on the two Falcons running the arm don't stop for a stage. And the shooter rapidly, unplanned, disassembled itself for the next 3 matches. And so even though we were, getting 7 cycles a match into the amp for our first 3 matches of the regional, when you are playing defense for the next 3 matches of Friday, it's, it's kind of done there. So we didn't necessarily design for fixability in mind for our first regional. And so something we kind of learned there is like making sure that we can design in a way where we give ourselves times to make spares for the things that we think are going to break and even the things we don't think are going to break. Because we brought spares for the intake because that's going to get beat up, but then it's of course not the thing you bring spares for.
"2472 just builds the one bot. We are looking towards building a second chassis for next year. I think this is one of the first years we haven't had to pirate most of the parts and motors off of the previous year's bot just to build a bot. So, but having some ability to practice on the practice field over at Hmong Academy has certainly helped our drivers get some more real world experience and taken advantage of that. We have a young team on the drive team. They're just sophomores, most of them.
Yeah, we just can afford and have the manpower to build 1 robot. So that's what we do.
What 2847 does is this year we basically picked a design by the Monday after kickoff and then went with it, and we built 1 fully functioning robot, and then we have like parts of another robot, hopefully building a second one to teach the younger members how to do things on that second robot.
Nightcrawler has only built 1 robot every year since Bag Day went away. We used to build 2 robots when there was Bag Day. Sometimes the second robot was basically just a chassis so that the programmers could program their auto pass after the robot was in the bag. But since Bag Day went away, we've only ever built 1 bot. And this year we got way behind for a variety of reasons. We were waiting for Krakens to come. We were mostly waiting for the L3 modules for our SDS Swerve drive to come. We didn't want to assemble we cannibalized our Swerve from last year's robot, but we had a robot that our students could drive. So we really didn't want to take that apart until we were ready to, because we wanted our drivers to be able to drive last year's Swerve bot. And so we were waiting through our L3s, and we were waiting, and SDS had updated their ship date, and then they backed it 2 weeks, and so that threw off our schedule as well. So we could have been better about just biting the bullet and taking it apart and building our Swerve chassis with the existing L2s that we had, and then plan to disassemble it all again to swap out the L3s. We decided not to do that. That was probably a mistake in hindsight. We had tons and tons and tons of issues with our Swerve code. We had Swerve working just fine in Telia. The problem is that if you can hack together driving code for a Swerve module, but that doesn't mean it's going to know where it's at. And odometry was just constantly screwed up, and we had so many inverted inputs and inverted rotations, and it took us a really long time for us to get the Swerve drive to know where it was on the field based on odometry, and that was painful. Because we took so long to put the robot together, the programming team got the robot 4 days late. We had, I think it was 9, maybe 10 days for the programmers, 10 calendar days for the programming team to work on the robot while final assembly was going on for Climber and things like that. So usually what we'll do is once the robot can do its main thing, and this year it was pickup and shooting, then we'll let the programmers have it most of the time while the build team will kind of run out like a pit crew and in NASCAR, and they'll try to assemble a piece or something while the programmers are changing code, and then they'll back off and let the programmers have the bot. This year, those 10 days that we had the robot, I think we spent 5 of them just getting the robot to drive correctly. So that was really painful. I don't know that building 2 robots is the right course of action for us, but I do think that we need to try to be putting things together sooner. And if we don't have the parts we're waiting for, we need to come up with an alternative. So that's, I think, our lesson learned from this year. At least it is for me, whether the team agrees or not. We haven't done our kind of retrospective yet as a team.
So as Scott mentioned, the Firebears have traditionally built 2 robots, and usually they call them the practice robot and the competition robot. So they would build basically 2 of the exact same thing. And moving into this year, we decided to try and build an alpha robot and a beta robot. So we got started on the alpha robot. We spent a bit more time kind of figuring out a lot of the design challenges there and fine-tuning it than we probably should have. So we competed at week 0 with our alpha robot. And at the same time, we had half of the team back at Roseville assembling the beta robot. So the beta robot was, finally getting put together Wednesday right before we're putting it in the trailer to go compete at Duluth. So it slid a little bit and it was hard to fit in the schedule. If we want to continue that way, we probably need to try and get alpha put together bit earlier and switch over to beta, but there are definitely a lot of benefits to having 2. We basically tore alpha apart for spare parts at Duluth, and thankfully we didn't need a lot of it, but having it was good.
I'm curious, by what week do most teams finalize their design? Ben just said, Ben or Benjamin, sorry, I don't know which one you go by, but you had just mentioned that you guys pick a design the Monday after kickoff. That's significantly earlier than Nightcrawler has. This year, we sort of settled on our final design, probably the earliest we've ever done. I think it was probably a week, probably the 9 days, I would say, 9 days after kickoff. We had decided what type of scoring mechanism we were going to have. Hadn't settled on a Climber yet. And I would say that's since I've been on the team, and this is my 9th year, that's the earliest Nightcrawler's ever picked a final design. Our prototyping is usually longer than that. And we went to a lot of effort this year to streamline our prototyping. But what does everybody else do? Are you still in design phase in week 2, or are you pretty much settled and you're building?
I guess I can elaborate a little more on what I meant by Monday is like we have like a basic design and then we prototype based off it, and it'll still like change, but we send our parts off probably the Monday of the second week, I think is when we sent them off this week to get manufactured.
I think that's similar to where we were in this. By the end of week 2, we had our chassis back and we were starting to build up on that. It's probably the earliest we've been in the last few years since my kids have been involved with the team. So that's kind of my scope of history.
The last few years for us, we've had a pretty good rolling working prototype week 3 or 4. With some minor changes after that, but We always build 2 robots at least, and because we have 2 teams. And this year we built a lot of stuff off of last year's chassis as a kind of an alpha robot to test some concepts and stuff, and then transferred it all over to the competition stuff. Probably about that week 3 or 4 time frame.
So we started our season really right on our aggressive schedule. We had our alpha drive base put together a week after kickoff, which was great that everyone could start, working off of that. But then it took us, I think, 2.5, maybe 3 weeks to get the arm on that until we finally had a functional robot that we could start working further with and tuning.
Our design is usually like the rough idea is finalized within maybe a week to 10 days of kickoff, but it's really like genuinely broad. It's just the streamlined approach. Then throughout the season, we add more things to it, like an over the bumper or fix the climb or something like that. But this year was kind of different because we're going to a week 4 instead of a week 1 for our first event. And we had a lot more time to think about stuff. So we're still changing, we're still iterating. So I don't think we were ever really finished our design.
For those teams that have competed already, is anyone looking at a significant redesign for a second regional that they're attending? Or is everyone pretty settled that the design they chose is the right design and they're going to continue with it?
I think it is 7-8. Our biggest problem was we've never, driven swerve in a competition before, and so that in itself we damaged our own robot from on set. And then we had some wiring problem that CAN ID mixed up that that caused also another. We were pretty self-destructive. But overall, I think by the end of our last match on Saturday, even though we lost miserably, but the kids were really excited, and so was I, because we were trying all these different fixes, and we find out that we can reliably shoot into the amplifier, which is our number 1 priority anyway for competition. We never got a chance to display that at Grand Forks because of fixes that we had to do. But we saw that system work. The speaker shot works. It just need to be fine-tuned, and the climbers need to be fine-tuned. And so all of these things we realized they were working out. So our header, our intake shooter took a lot of damage because, if you slam that thing into anything, it will take a damage. So we kind of expected that. So, but one of the things in the design flaw was we'd never give it any kind of a corner bracing for where. So we have 2 aluminum 2x1s coming this way, and then have one crossing. We never had a bracing from here, so that whole system just kept bending and twisting, and it cracked open. And so we figured out a fix that will stop that problem from happening. We also we use a thicker aluminum for that too. So overall, we're just gonna stick with the same design we have, and just add the support structures that needed, structural supports that needed to stabilize it better, and just fine tune our robot for what it was designed to do, and try that out in St. Cloud.
I think for Nightcrawler, the changes that we're looking at doing before our next competition is we were only able to score on the trap twice, and we tried just about every quals match. So we're looking at things that we need to do to improve that. We've decided that we need to climb higher. So we're looking at, we're really happy with the way our climber works, but there's like if you look at our robot, it's got massive teeth and it just kind of chomps onto the chain. And we're looking at making those teeth longer so that we can pull that chain right down to our frame, which we think should get us about another 3 inches of height. So we're hoping that will solve a lot of our trapping issues. But overall, I really like our climber. Our climber is a big kind of a 4-bar arm that comes down, and that arm, you can't get a note stuck on it. There's no way to get a note stuck on it. If you touch the chain, you can basically climb because you don't have two independent hooks that are pushing the chain away from each other. But we just can't climb high enough. So we're looking at changing that so we can climb higher. Other than that, we just have to repair everything because pretty much everything got bent or broken.
We're redesigning some of the hooks for our climber to help make it more consistent and easier to catch, particularly if we're climbing with another bot on the same chain. We found it was, as the other bot starts climbing, it kind of moves where you think things are. And then really getting to some of the stuff that we just ran out of time for and hadn't tested, especially on autonomous. If it wasn't tested, we didn't roll it. So now the programmers have had the bot for the last few days to just work on those elements.
Our biggest plan is to get better at the amp. We're going to modify that part of the robot because we weren't consistent with it. And it just really seemed like there were not a ton of amp bots out there. So we were really consistent with the speaker, but hoping to improve upon that, I guess, the most part.
Yeah, for us, we seem to have a lot of success with the amp, which we were glad about considering it. But for the speaker, we were only really consistently getting in those near the subwoofer shots. It was still good enough for our 4-note auto and not going right up against the subwoofer to not get the double note penalty if something got missed. But we're worried that if we had to play against actual defense, it would just all get blocked. Because when we tried to shoot from the podium, it wasn't as consistent as it was in the practice field for us on the real field elements.
For
Hey,
Minneapolis, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. For Minneapolis, we want to speed up our climbers. We realized we way overdid the gear ratio on those. I think we did a calculation that we can lift around 4,000 pounds with it, which is ridiculous. So switching to a smaller gear ratio on that, improving our climber hooks. A big one is our belly pan. We cracked it in one of our first matches at Duluth, and we just kind of, bolted it together and went along. But by the end of the competition, our entire arm was oscillating quite a bit because the belly pan was flexing as it moved. So we're going to be reinforcing that quite a bit going into Minneapolis. And then a lot of software work for autos and such.
Hey, I got a question here. One thing I consider for the kids to change, and because I don't really want them to make up, the goal is to have practice time between now and Granite City, because that's what really we need. But our climber, the way it's set up, it interferes with our arm going up and down because it's just a lot in that same spot. So I was going to ask, what do you guys think? I mean, we're not trying to trap, so I don't think we need a 2-stage climber. We just need something that will get us off the floor. So a 1-stage can do that. But if we were to figure out a way to fix that on the back of our mechanism that shoots, so that it's away from all this other junk that we cannot really get. Is that a bad idea to pull your robot up by the arm, your main mechanism arm? that's gonna waste, will be the only place to put it if we decided to change it for the center of gravity.
That's what 3134 is doing, and it worked over in Grand Forks. It wasn't real fast, or your ability to harmonize wasn't great because the way we had it set up, because it was kind of a addition at the end a little bit. But we're going to change that for Granite City probably, but it's effective to get off the ground. It's just a climber in the box cut down that we kind of strapped onto the back of our arm, and it held up fine.
So I'm gonna have a chat with you, Jesse. Then thanks.
No problem.
I would say if your arm is strong enough that you feel confident, go ahead. My only concern with an arm is where are your wires running that are running on your shooter. Are you have a risk of pulling or damaging your wires, and just generally, if you're up on a chain and you get hit and you're swinging by your arm, you're going to destroy your arm. So we had this conversation at Nightcrawler of maybe we should just climb in the arm, and my hesitation was, look, if we have another way to do it, let's do it the other way, because the last thing you want to do is damage your primary scoring mechanism. But that doesn't mean it's not the right choice, right? If it's the right choice for you, then that's great. Go do it that way. I will share that if you're looking for climber ideas and you feel like you're out of space, go look at Green Machine's robot. They had one climber hook, and it was on the side of their robot. I think it was on the side of their robot, and they would climb right next to the stage post, and they would basically let their bumpers rub up against the post. So they always climbed off to the side. It always made for an easy buddy climb, and they only needed one hook. I thought that was very clever. I thought that was a great idea, and that might be an idea that you can borrow if you can. If you're out of space and especially if you're looking for a single stage climber, because you can reach up pretty high to get up to that 4 feet to grab the chain right by the eye bolt, and then pull down quite a ways. And you're always climbing at the exact same height because you're always climbing way off on the side. So whether you're doing a buddy climb or you're climbing by yourself, the geometry of the chain doesn't change a whole lot.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying too, Scott, and that was the main reason why we would like. Well, I'm thinking the proposal under consider the changes, because when the arms go up and down, the space gap between the arm and the climber is so narrow, and sometimes things move around when you start moving the robots around, and then wire gets disconnected, and that was one of the issues we had. And I'm like, well, if we can find a better solution to this, instead of trying to zip tie the climber, make sure it doesn't interfere, because it's not so much a bottom tubing, it's the second, adding on. The first stage is fine, it's just adding on the second stage. Somewhere in there it wiggles a lot, and I checked the bolt and there was no loose bolt, but it just wiggles more than it should, or I think it should. And then it keep interfering with that. The bolt head keep interfering with the wiring, and that's just something that's the problem we're trying to avoid from happening next week 6.
Another one to look at maybe would be like Toolcat's climber that was over in Grand Forks. It's basically it's a 2-hook climber, one on each side of the robot, and it's just sprockets and a chain with a hook that's mounted to the chain on each side, and it just rotates up, and you can pull almost down to the bumpers with that thing. It's super simple, really kind of pretty clever design that they got going on there, but pretty effective, it seemed like. So just a really easy way to get it done and get as high as you can, especially if you're looking at trapping potentially.
Yeah, that's the really hard part. If you're a team that's trying to trap, you pretty much have to pull that chain down to the bumper, just to get the extension that you need to get up there to that trap door. So trying to design a climber that pulls down that low is really tricky, which I suspect is the reason why a lot of teams this year did not try for the trap. It's just the complexity of getting that high. It really was. It really is a very high climb to get to.
Yeah, that's definitely something we had a lot of trouble with this year was our climbers being able to trap with our mechanism by dunking it in. We used UND's robot in 3 days. We did like the inner tubing within the outer tubing for climbers in a box, and then it was a slot down the middle for a hook, bringing it all the way to the bumpers. That's one of the things we're looking at changing, or our hooks for our second regional.
For those teams that have a climber with 2 independent hooks on it, it seemed to me in week 1 that if you were trying to do a buddy climb, it got really hard to get 4 independent hooks on that chain. But that's just observing the few matches I got to watch up in Duluth. I'm curious to know if that was just the matches that I saw, or if that's a real struggle that teams are trying to deal with.
We liked having 2 independently actuating hooks for us because when we were buddy climbing, what we would do is we'd actually almost do what 1816 does, where we'd only climb with one hook and then push ourselves against the truss on the other side, and that seemed to work, really well for when you needed to buddy climb and only have one hook. But then when we weren't buddy climbing, it gave us more control over, if we're climbing like somewhere on the chain where they aren't necessarily the same heights, being able to independently actuate them.
In week 1, we struggled with lining up, particularly with a second bod, and partly I think the hooks were too small. The team is looking at recatting those and finding something that would make it easier to latch on so that they could just kind of grab and pull themselves up and make it faster, give them a little more chance to score at the end of the match before they have to start climbing.
I guess I had a quick question for the group as we got into playoffs and we had to work our way back up and we ran into batteries, keeping batteries charged. How many batteries do most teams use? Because we went through all of ours and then we're running around to other teams to get theirs since we had to go 7 playoff matches and we've never quite done that before.
Natasha, how many batteries does your team buy, or how many do they bring to competition?
I think we had 8.
Nightcrawler buys 10 batteries every year. At least we bought 10 the last couple of years. I think that's probably more than we need to buy, but we've also had years where we got 2 batteries that just didn't hold the charge as well. We have a battery. It does like a bunch of cycles. I don't even know what it's called, but it's some type of battery tester. Ian's shaking his head. He knows what I'm talking about. And we went through and tested the amp hour rating, or I don't even know what it tests. And we found last year that we had 2 batteries after there was a report on Chief Delphi of a bunch of bad batteries coming out of the supply chain. So we've bought 10 the last few years. We have 2 3-bank battery chargers, so we always have 6 batteries on a charger at competition.
Is there any other place to test batteries? Like, can you take them somewhere and get them tested? Because we don't have that. And I'm not quite sure. Yeah, we're not necessarily 100% sure that all of our batteries are solid. We don't buy 10 new ones each year. We only buy like 2 or 3, and then we have to use ones from previous years as well.
Yeah, I'm looking up on Chief Delphi right now if there's a way to test batteries, because I know that one of our mentors kind of does it, where they have a rig set up because they do some electrical engineering stuff in there for their job, so they have a rig set up at their house and they test them there. But I know that for FRC battery beaks, because they don't actually load the battery, aren't super useful and effective for testing batteries, because I know we were doing that for a long time. Although I think it looks like there's a couple Chief Delphi posts about how to do it.
What about everybody else? How many batteries are you bringing to competition, and how many are you charging while you're there?
So we buy, at least the past 2 years, we've bought 8 new batteries each year to try and cycle out some of the old ones that we have. We'll probably drop that down to 6 going forward now that we've got kind of a good set to go with. And I think we try to bring around 16 to competition, and we do have 2 of the 3 bank chargers, so we try to keep 6 charging at a time.
Boy, you guys been missing unprepared. Uh, we have, I think, we have 8 batteries total right now. How long do these batteries, before you get them out of rotation, how long have you guys used a battery for? Like, because I'm concerned about maybe having 1 or 2 batteries that may not be holding charge anymore.
We usually we use batteries for competition for probably 2 years, and then once they get to be beyond 2 years, then they're used exclusively for demos. So we just did a demo at one of the elementary schools, and we take 5 or 6 batteries, 2.5-hour demo. We take 5 or 6 batteries and 2 chargers, and that usually can get us to squeak through, especially if we take a chance where every time we change a battery, we do like a 15-minute show and tell of how the robot's built. Then we can get those batteries to survive. So even the batteries that we cycle out of competition, they end up getting a hefty workout anytime we do a demo, because the demos are usually more than an hour long. So that's usually how we do it. Oh, I see in the comments here, Ian posted the Andy Mark tester, and Ben, he said that's the testing that we do. Ben, you did the testing last year. Can you share a little bit about how that works and how that went?
Yeah, just give me a second. Got my going there. Yeah, it runs. I can't remember. It's like 1 amp or 2 amp test for as long as I think it's like a 2.5-hour test. It basically runs the battery down, and then it looks to see if there's any weird disruptions when it's charging, because it should be a nice smooth curve as the battery's discharging. And sometimes there's disruptions that can be caused by loose wires or problems with the battery chemistry. But then you can go and you can see it's like, okay, this battery can or this battery has a normal discharge cycle. What it doesn't do very well is it doesn't test immediate discharge like from your robot, because you're drawing way more amps. You're drawing 10, 20, 30 plus amps when you're running your robot. So it can't test the quick discharge, but it's basically kind of looking to see what the health of the battery is.
Yeah, and jumping onto the how long do teams keep their batteries from, we test all of our batteries every year, and we keep the ones that are above a certain threshold we set that we deem we can continue to use. So that's usually a couple years, although there's a couple batteries from 2018 that are still kicking, which is funny because from our experience, we talked to Neutrino about this too, and we have a mentor who used to be a Neutrino student. They're also using their 2018 batteries because they perform well above all the other ones. So it really varies by batch, I guess. And MK Battery was doing something else in 2018.
So we've been sort of all over the place tonight, which I don't have a problem with that at all. We talked a lot about once teams meet. We've talked about sort of the cadence. What I think is interesting is I've heard a couple of teams talk about how they have optional meetings or they have task group meetings. I think that's a pretty normal thing. At least it feels like it's a pretty normal thing. Other teams, they just meet all the time. I think that was really interesting. I'm curious: are people maintaining that schedule between first competition and second competition, or are you pretty much down to a bare bones meeting time between number one and number two?
3926 struggles with this because our school, we are fortunate. Well, depending on who you ask, most of the time I'd say that we start 2 weeks earlier, but that gives us a 2-week long winter break and a 2-week long spring break, which is nice because you get a really good break from school to refresh. But it also means that for those 2 weeks, we don't really meet too much. Traditionally, we always schedule our first regional right before our spring break, which is why we did Great Northern this year instead of Duluth, because we wanted to have those 2 weeks to catch up on schoolwork and things like that. And that really kind of turns into is the first week after our regional, we don't really meet at all because people are out of town, people are recovering. You don't want to meet on the Monday after a regional and everyone's catching up on sleep. And then, second week, it's kind of whoever you can get, which usually is not too many people. And so it's been one of the areas we've struggled with for a long time is like kind of figuring out, how do we maintain this energy going into our second regional when we have, our first regional last year. It was really bad because it was our first regional. We had 2 weeks off of school. Then the next week we had our second regional because North Star was week 4. This year we have, an extra week in between that. But it's still just never been something that's super easy to deal with because it really turns into we fix the robot and then we maybe get more drive practice and maybe more time for autos. I don't know how much time we're going to get for autos considering we're already at 4 notes, but maybe like more paths and more time on the practice field.
So after our crunch leading up to week 0 in Duluth, we gave the kids basically this entire week off. We did have a recap meeting Thursday and then started back into our normal 4-day-a-week schedule Saturday, yesterday. And then this week we have our open house Tuesday, but then we're going to lead it back into our, task meetings Thursday, Friday, full meetings Saturdays and Tuesdays. We haven't quite decided what we're doing with spring break, which is, I think, week 4 for us. Or no, it's week 5 leading into week 6. So we'll have to figure out what we're doing there.
I thought we would be taking tomorrow off, but I've already been informed that the changes are in the works. So yeah, no, between regionals, we still stick with our 5 days a week, and still some weekends if we need to, because realistically, I think between all of our regionals, we've always done some major changes of one of the systems on our robots. So yeah, we'll be back at it tomorrow.
When you're meeting 5 days a week, how many hours are you meeting for at a time?
Kids come in after school and stay the main kids, which again, we're small. So I have 4 kids that are there the majority of the time and a few others that pop in and out, but they're there from right after school and, usually wrap up about 7:30, 8 o'clock at the latest sometimes.
Nightcrawler's on spring break this week. So last week was our first week back after Duluth, and we did meet on Monday and Wednesday. The crowd for both days was very small. We have 35-ish kids on the team, and I think we had 10 kids there on Monday and probably about that many on Wednesday as well. We told kids that they had to prioritize homework, and hopefully that's the reason why they weren't at the meetings. They were getting caught up on schoolwork. And then we have spring break this coming week. So I think we have a core group of students, I would guess anywhere from 4 to 6 or 7 students that will be at the regular meeting times, and maybe even an optional meeting here or there over break. We have a ton of work to do on the robot to get it back together, replace all the vent parts, and our kids, our captains especially, are really chomping at the bit to get that thing reassembled. But normally, after our first regional, Nightcrawler cuts back to 2 regular meetings a week. So we go back to our Monday, Wednesday schedule, 6 to 9 on Mondays and 6 to 8 on Wednesdays. And then we do optional meetings if the mentors are available and if students want to work on the robot. And if we meet on Saturdays, we usually only meet for half a day so that we don't have to bring in lunch. So it'll be interesting to see with this year, with needing to do so many repairs on the robots, how many days a week we actually end up meeting. But that's our typical schedule, is we cut way back after our first regional.
We tend to keep the same schedule again, of course, with homework, although our rule is if they're not passing, they don't get to miss school. So most of them are missing practices leading up to the regional, so they can go to them. But we'll meet over spring break this week. The kids decided that.
We enforce the same policy about you have to be passing, because it's not right to take, at least we feel it's not right to take kids out of more school when they're not passing classes. So I'm glad to hear that another team is behind that, because my AD is like, well, it's not midterm and it's not, end of the quarter. So technically they can still go. And how come you're not letting them go? And I'm like, it doesn't make sense. So and we have it in our student handbook. So the students have all signed and agreed to it at the beginning of the season anyways, but most of them don't pay particularly close attention to it until right before competition.
We had students who couldn't go until after school on Friday, and we happened to have a mentor who was coming up with his family who could bring some of those students who weren't allowed to miss school.
Yep, same here. We had one kid show up on Saturday for the event because I'm like, I'm not taking you on Thursday and Friday.
Agreed.
Well, in Ashby, I'm glad we have this policy. It's a school-wide policy. If you are near an F, close to a D, to put you in that eligibility list. If you're on that list, you cannot participate in any student extracurricular activity. So it makes it so easy for me to be like, look, it's not my decision. It's not my, and even if it was my decision, it would still come down to you're a student first before academic first before, robotics. So, and plus robotics is also academic. So show me that you have student leadership by displaying that in your classroom too, by doing your schoolwork. Because I'm also a teacher in this school. So I'm sorry, I don't want you failing my class either. So.
Yeah, Nightcrawler, our academic eligibility requires that you can only have 1D, no failing grades, and no incomplete work. But I don't think that's a Nightcrawler thing. I think that's I was under the impression that it was a state high school league academic eligibility thing, but maybe that's only for the school. But no failing grades and only 1D, no incomplete work. The incomplete work can be really tricky because you're relying on the teachers to get things into the grade book in a timely manner. And so, unfortunately, when students turn in work late, then teachers don't get to it, right away, because why would they? They have other things to do. So it can be kind of a dance just before competition to make sure that an incomplete is really incomplete and work hasn't been turned in and just hasn't been entered yet. But that's how our academic policy works.
Hey, if nobody else have any other topic, any other thing to say regarding this, I have 2 random questions that I want to ask, if that's okay. Is that okay, Scott?
Fire away.
All right. The first one is I've had a few parents grumbling at this. Why is if the schools give us any money or sponsor us in any way? I'm like, nope. besides giving us a space to work in, nothing else. And they're like, well, if this is a Minnesota State high school league, they make provisions for others, sporting and whatnot. This one, I'm like, well, I wish they were doing that, but they aren't. So I've talked to a few of them that are like, if you have your concern, you can go to a school board meeting and express it there, but I'm not sending you because I also have to work with these people before somebody's like, oh, he just came here and started stirring things up, because I actually do like working there. I like to go to work every day and not have people give me side eye or, stink eye or, that kind of stuff. Plus, I want that program to survive and thrive, not becomes it becomes a pain in people's existence. So what suggestions would you have, going forward with that, if any parents come up to me, because they're seeing the incredible things these kids have done in the last 2 years, and they're wondering if the district is recognizing that and being able to, because the kids themselves have seen like, well, schools that have the district supporting them, also teams that have the district supporting them also seems to do better too. And I'm like, well, that's one thing too, but also, have more people in the town, involving themselves in the program helps also too. If it is not my wife and my cousin, we can't have practice or do it. It's a strain on one family, So what's your suggestions?
I guess I'll just share. I felt like over the last couple of years, I've built up a good relationship with our kind of school board and administration, and kind of found that like a couple rogue teachers going to a school board meeting, rogue parents going to a school board meeting and kind of complaining doesn't work as well. But if you can kind of provide a united front with a specific ask, I think that's really helpful. So help us with our registration fee or this, and really lay out the student experience, and also an open house or a tour of what you're doing. I think a lot of even school board members, they know there's a robotics program, but until they see it live and they see an autonomous run and see the kids working on it, all of a sudden it becomes really real. And then some of it too can be just asking the questions about what is covered. What is your district covering for other programs? Does the football team get all their travel paid for? Is that all student activity fees? And trying to understand that structure a little bit, just so you know where you stand and what's a reasonable ask for your district. I guess the digging I've done, it actually varies quite a bit from district to district. And so understanding if your ask is within the range of normal, I guess, or trying to figure that out. It's kind of a starting point anyway.
From a Nightcrawler perspective, I don't have any advice for you regarding money. We actually do a very good job with our fundraising and student donations for travel and sponsorship. And I don't want to go to the school for money where there's not really where we're doing fine. What I do though, what we have been trying to get more of a foothold, I guess you might say, is in space. And we have started asking around, and we had this conversation with our activities director of name all the varsity sports that never get to practice on a full court or a full field. And the answer is the only one is robotics. Every other varsity sport gets to have a practice on full field or full court. And we never have in 18 years. So I feel like that's starting to get us a little bit of traction to realize that, okay, maybe there is a problem here, maybe there is a need here. We'll see. We're still rolling out a quarter or a half a field of carpet every night and rolling it all back up and pushing our field elements off to the side. And I don't anticipate that'll change anytime soon. But I think that rather than just complaining about space, I feel that the approach of saying, show us all the other sports that are in a similar situation, and it turns out there aren't any. I think that may be a more tactful approach than we've ever done before, and hopefully will help us get some traction. But from a money point of view, I don't have any advice for you on that, because we're not actively seeking more support. We get about 10% of our budget to run the team from the district. That comes in the form of one coach and travel to Duluth and travel to one off-season competition. So the bus, they pay for the bus to Duluth and the bus to one of our off-season competitions. So that's okay. I'm not going to complain about finances because we've actually done very well financially, pulling out their other 90% of those funds.
2472 doesn't get a lot of money from the district either, and over the past couple of years have made more of a decision to kind of enforce that gap. And our booster club does the majority of the fundraising. The school does pay for the coach budget that is split amongst 3 of our paid coaches, just so we have some of our mentors that have keys to the building. We do get space, and we have a very good relationship with the industrial arts and trades group of Centennial High School, which has been building out their program. So we have the use of the mill and some of the other equipment that is there for the group. And then they cover they'll cover regional travel. They don't cover the full bus to Duluth, but they cover some of our other regional travel. So Minneapolis tournament, things like that. But the space and being able to use that space with no additional cost, and we have a dedicated, I don't know, it used to be somebody's office back in the day, dedicated space where we can keep our bots and have that locked and secured, has also been a good partnership. And we work with the school board. They come once a year and see what we're doing, and it has allowed more flexibility in our spend because we found it was very difficult to navigate parts purchasing. Food purchasing is no longer allowed through school funds and things like that. So it was just a little more streamlined for the booster club to do it. But this is really only our second full year with the boosters, and admittedly we are still learning things and how to make it work better than it did the year before.
And you're all right. I'm actually, Sam, thanks for that suggestion, because I will call that those 2 parents that I spoke to recently, we have a good communication. And I think I like your idea of being more organized in the approach. And the thing, and some being specific, and I think some of the things like I would think the district can be in a way supportive is, like you said, cover some of our travel costs, like to at least a regional, or say, hey, we pay for your first regional, or even pay for the second, something, and I think that's where the kids are coming. Is like, well, they spend all this money on, because these are the same kids that play basketball, some of them play volleyball, so they know what the school spent in those other on those other activities. And so it's like, well, but I like the whole organized approach, because I don't want to. Typically in my life, I ruffled a lot of feathers in my career, but I don't want to ruffle the feather enough that the program will be at risk, because the kids, we have an appetite for the program in the school. Just it needs time to survive it.
Travel might be low-hanging fruit, because a lot of people they don't robotics is a difficult thing for them to comprehend in terms of costs and parts and all of those things. And they, when you talk about robotics, a lot of them think Lego League robotics unless they have seen anything to do with FRC. But everybody gets the concept of travel. And so, if the school is already accustomed to sending kids to a tournament, an overnight tournament for basketball or for football, or maybe it's not a tournament, maybe it's just a game long ways away and it's too late to drive back at night, or too long, that's an easy thing to do. And I think a good approach there is that, do you want kids to miss out on it because their families can't afford to pay the travel fees? No school in this day and age, I think, wants to have kids missing out. And it's an equity play, I suppose you could say, where schools are much more conscious of not having kids skip out for financial reasons. And so I think travel might be low-hanging fruit as a way to get some additional funding. And then you can take your fundraising money and any donations you get and apply them towards building your robot.
I think many schools have an Angel Fund, or they have, organizations or people that they can go to if students are in a position where they can't afford to participate without some assistance. that there's kind of a go get to reach out to those folks. And that is something that, we've certainly had a benefit from before too. We're just always cautious because sometimes even needing to ask is a barrier in of itself. And we are fortunate that one of our coaches is a teacher at the school, so they have access to information of maybe who has reduced meal program participant, things like that, that they can kind of just say, hey, student X, is there enough to fund that person to go to a tournament? And we just kind of, yes, there is. Let's, sign them up.
And I was sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say we're funded some through the school. My salary as head coach and our assistant coach salaries are paid through the school. That wasn't the case 11 years ago when I first started. The three coaches were all just paid a flat $1,000 stipend. So then I had to work towards, because teachers only negotiate every other year. So I had to wait till negotiating year and I had to pull a bunch of numbers together, crunch them, and then point out how much time I'm giving in, just like the volleyball coaches and the basketball coaches. And I had to negotiate that. So now I'm on the same salary schedule as like a head volleyball coach. And then the school also gives us a budget of $7,000. And then the rest we raise through sponsors or grants. So I'd say we're fairly fortunate, and we don't do a ton of fundraising because we're so small that we kind of make it all work with the money that we get from either the school or our sponsors.
So I do a lot of grant writing because, like Natasha, my team size is like about the same size as Natasha's, really. We do a lot of grants writing, and we also have a local program through the community-based program that supports projects. And robotics came up during their spring board meeting that they weren't going to, because we've asked them to usually we ask them to cover our travel costs, and they weren't going to do it because they've done it in the past 2 seasons, and like, well, there are other programs that we want to support in the community, which makes sense, and I get that. So I was not offended in at least that the one program saying, well, we can this time around. So, and so just having something in place for financial security. Like, look, I don't mind writing grants and other things, but if the school can say, fine, we'll get you to your regional, then, that kind of thing, that would make me be a whole lot more happier. And then also makes the kid feel like the school values what they're doing. And I think I like Sam's suggestion on maybe doing some kind of an organized presentation demonstration later on, when the big rush and busy season is over, that would be something to say, hey, this is why we ask you for this, because things price continue to go up. I mean, either when we started, we don't also charge our students for travel fee, and we only charge them for their for covering some of the food costs, but they don't have to pay for the hotel. And some teams I know do that, but I also know the families in my group right now. If we did that, some of them can't shoulder it, and I don't want to lose kids that want to do it because of financial, and that's kind of where my concern is.
For us over at Cass Lake, we have some mentor stipends that the school pays, and we're not on the same level as like even me as the head coach. I'm JV paid, and then my assistant coaches are below that. But we do have some money for that, and then we get a $3,000 budget for parts for 2 teams from the school. So $3,000 total for 2 teams, and then we have our school pays our registration fee for our boys team, because that was the original team. So they pay our first event registration fee for that. Sponsors pay for the girls team, both of their regionals, and our second event for the boys team. And then we also have some dues and membership money that they pay. Like they pay for the Robotics Coaches Association membership for all the coaches. They pay for our Northern Minnesota Robotics Conference dues. and a few other things like that. And then there's maybe some extra stuff like if we qualify for worlds or state, that we can kind of dip into a little bit. But for our students, to be on our team, there's no cost incurred by a student's family at all. Zero. Absolutely zero. No activities fee, no travel fee, no food on travel, no uniform fee. That is covered by the team, and that's covered by sponsors mostly. But to be on a robotics team for 4 years, it would cost the students exactly $0 to fully participate 100%, which is kind of fortunate, but that's not entirely thanks to our school. That's thanks to the people that support us. So.
Jeremiah, did you say that you had 2 topics?
Oh, yeah, sorry. The other question it's just something from this weekend, Natasha was there. I don't know if you noticed. It was 95-76 Loretto Lightning. They were a rookie year, and I'm like, were they a rookie year, or had they been playing to be a team for? They seemed like a well-funded, well-resourced team, and I thought anyone knew anything about them. I was just curious.
They're a break-off team from Orange Crush. So
Okay.
one of their mentors, or maybe a couple of their mentors, were on the Orange Crush, and so there maybe was some experience. I don't know exactly all of the details, but that's what when I talked to their coach, he said that there was a parting of ways a little bit, and then they started another team.
That would make more sense to me because, I mean, they had a really nice robot too. It's like, thanks.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Is that not a new team, more of a new number. So half of an old team and a new number was kind of the way it was told to me.
I had a quick question since I'll be meeting with my AD tomorrow. When I look at the standings for week 2, we're sitting at 44 points. Can I pretty much tell my AD that we're going to state? Would you agree with that? Or am I being premature in making that statement to him?
No, you're gone.
Yeah, I think I saw somewhere in some Slack someplace that 36-38 is sort of the danger zone of on the edge. Natasha, do you know where you are in your section? Are you number 1, number 2 in your section right now?
No. Otters and Gators got that, and they were above us at the same competition. So,
But
no.
44 is a pretty big number, though.
Okay.
I think Jesse's right.
Yeah, I think 44 should be, because I know we were at 36 last year and we were number 1 in section 3, but section 3 was also that was the lowest number 1 spot of any of the sections last year when we got that. So I think 44 is a pretty easy making it.
Yeah, each section gets 2 automatic representatives regardless of their score. And then, 36, 35, you're kind of on the bubble right now, probably. I think 38, 39 will make it. 37 will make it. So that's kind of where you're at. But yeah, 44 is, there's not much chance that you're going to be bumped out, I don't think, at that point.
All right, thanks. Because he's somewhat new to us, and it's hard to even explain. He didn't come, and so he has really no idea how this whole works. So it'll be a process just to explain it to him.
There'll be a whole slug of teams competing at 10K that haven't competed yet. But other than that, there might be a fair number of teams in St. Cloud that haven't competed yet too. But 44 seems like a pretty good number.
I counted for St. Cloud, and almost half of them were at Grand Forks. So that's a good amount of numbers that have already competed there for Granite City.
Okay. Yeah, Sam made a good point that a number of teams couldn't get into a regional in Minnesota, so they're heading to Iowa, and that'll be their first regional. Lacrosse is kind of late. There might be a couple that are getting in at lacrosse as their first regional, but that's usually a second regional for most people in Minnesota.
Same with Granite City. That's the latest regional. They're week 6 on a Sunday, so
Okay.
most of them have probably already competed.
I would not envy being a team that qualifies there.
Oh, that would be a disaster.
No. Yeah, you kind of have to have your champs arrangements already made by that before.
Well, I think I was told that the regional plan, at least this was way back, like over the summer. I think I was told that the regional planning committee might have might be pre-booking hotels for that regional that they can sell to the winning team, but I don't remember for sure if that is actually happening. So that's probably just hearsay at this point. If nothing else has come out about that, because it was something that they were thinking about.
That's a cool idea. I haven't heard any of that from Alex or any of those people down there, but it is a really cool idea and probably a very nice gesture. But I know we're getting close on our time. I wanted to congratulate Mr. Miller and his team on winning the GP over in Grand Forks. That's pretty awesome. Really proud of my girls that got that chairman's. So that's really cool. Be our first trip down to Houston. So I've been scrambling already, trying to get that all figured out. So we'll see.
All right. Anything else you want to do here before we wrap it up?
Oh yeah, where do I find the state rankings?
Awesome. Thanks.
There we go.
Tyler just posted
Tyler
it.
posted it.
Thank you.
I saw it in an email a week ago, but I haven't seen the most up-to-date ones. Tyler, do those include the results from this past weekend?
Correct.
Yes. All right. Awesome. I'll have to take a peek at that again now and see where everybody's at. All right. Well, I will end it with my typical shtick here. Please, will somebody sign up to host a topic for next week? We don't have any topics going out any further than this. So I think the rest of the schedule is wide open. If anyone's interested in hosting a conversation, please sign up to do that. Otherwise, I guess I will see everybody Sunday.
Thanks, Scott.
All right. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.
That's it for this week's FRC Roundtable. Join us live all season long, every Sunday night. Visit the website at team2052.com/roundtable to sign up for weekly invites. In the meantime, keep building, keep learning, and we'll see you next week.